This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Well, this continues to appear to be, that's a tortured construction, the year of Donald Trump.
It certainly
and
does.
The year of the anti-establishment. He and Cruz and I don't know, is Rubio a member of the establishment or not?
I'm not sure. They're all gaining in popularity. All three of them are, with Trump still in the lead, which is pretty amazing. But he's resonating. Mm-hmm. He's resonating with a lot of people.
What's happening to Jeb Bush?
I think I'm not sure he'll be in the race much longer. I would be surprised if he did stay. What do you think?
I'm waiting to see what happens in New Hampshire and Iowa.
Okay.
But it's certainly not been a boring primary season,
anything but boring. Anything but boring.
Well, and anything but boring, we have anything but boring in terms of our guest today. We have a very interesting guest.
We do.
Welcome back, Bob Latham.
Morning, Charlie.
Bob, you
Morning,
are the
Maura.
executive. You are the executive vice president of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. And you have been with us before to talk about transportation issues and road issues.
Absolutely.
Because there are very few people that are better qualified to talk about this in Pennsylvania, and we appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And just for your listeners, we represent the 30,000 men and women that make our highway safer and more convenient and easier to travel around. And we've been working hard the last 2 years trying to efficiently use the money that the legislature provided in the comprehensive transportation bill passed in 2013.
You know, and I think, Maura, it's made a difference.
It really has. I mean, if I could get out and hug every single one of them, I would. But that would create.
They do need a hug.
Yeah, that would create a hazard on the road. However, but it is really nice to see some of the work that's being done, getting done finally, especially on the bridges. But it does it might be a short-term pain for some very long-term gain in Pennsylvania. So.
Well, Bob, of course, like anything else, when we talk about any topic of state government, we have to go back to funding. Now, a lot of the funding for roads and bridges comes from the motor license fund. And there's been a lot of talk recently in Pennsylvania as we struggle and continue to struggle to reach a budget, to diverting a certain amount of this money for state police coverage. Some of that seems justified, perhaps some of it questionable. We're here to pursue this topic a little bit further with you. What is going on in Capitol Hill right now regarding the motor license fund?
Well, Charlie, you're right. The motor license fund was created back in the 1920s as part of the Pennsylvania Constitution. It essentially reserves gasoline taxes, registration fees, etc., for road improvements in Pennsylvania, road improvements and safety. And historically, there was a portion of that was used to fund the operations of the Pennsylvania State Police, or the old Highway Patrol, I guess, if you will, and that's which is certainly very important, very necessary, and part of our transportation system. And over the last number of years, really in the last decade or so, that level of money that has been, if you will, appropriated out of the motor license fund to the state police budget has been growing incrementally. And if you were to look at it, the amount from the general fund is on a sort of a slow growth, and out of the motor license fund it's going like this. So the concern is, we think that the General Assembly appears to be using the motor license fund as a way to augment the general fund because we've had this Transportation Act. And the concern is if this keeps going on, then all of the work that you were just talking about that we're able to do as a result of the Transportation Act will be negatively impacted. We won't be able to do as much. We won't be able to fix as many bridges. We won't be able to do as many safety projects because we're essentially shifting money from the highway fund to the general fund. That's a big concern. Obviously, it's a concern to the people that I represent because that's our market. But it should be a concern to the citizens of Pennsylvania because throughout the discussion on Act 89, which we call it the Transportation Bill, citizens in polls and discussion groups and so forth said it's okay to tax us if we know where the money's going, if we know that it's going to road improvements. And if we look at it and if all of a sudden we lose confidence and we say, well, it's just another way to, to move money around, I think that could be a problem.
Well, one of the biggest issues this year with that is that it's an unprecedented amount. I mean,
Yes.
you've been talking about it's been steadily going up, but this year it's a big leap in the
big
amount
growth.
of funds being appropriated over to the state police. And we love the state police too. So but do we have any idea why that the amount is so much and what it is going to be used for? Do you have any way of knowing that?
No. No to your second question.
Okay.
Obviously, the work of the state police is very, 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 very important.
Absolutely.
They do a number. I mean, they do all kinds of things. There, from terrorism to drug interdiction to human trafficking, things like that. Those are all very important work that needs to be funded. But the legislature can't rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. And this very simple explanation is it's easier to take money from one bucket and put it in another than it is to look at taxpayers and say, you know what, if we're going to have all these important services, we may have to find a way to fund it. So that's sort of the way we see things happening right now.
Well, it's possible by the time this show airs that we will have a budget in Pennsylvania, but it's interesting to be in the month of December and still be talking about our budget. But are there any new proposals? Or I assume you've been communicating this, and you've got a message that you've sent to the governor and the legislature that you're not happy with this.
Well, I think yes. Historically, there has always been a portion of the state police's important work that goes to highway safety. So we have two issues that are going on now. One is this simple growth in the amount of money going from the highway fund to the state police. The other is that we're seeing many municipalities now looking around at the municipalities nearby them and saying, you know what, they don't have a police force. They just let the state police do it. And we're seeing,
we can save money too.
We can save money too and get this free policing. Well,
Yeah.
it's not free.
Yeah.
Somebody's paying for
Yes.
it, and that's causing this. So what we're asking is that the General Assembly authorize a group, maybe the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee or some scholarly study to look at what exactly is the spending of the state police on roads, develop what that appropriate number is, and say this is a target where we want to get to into the future. I don't know what that number is.
Well, in fact, the Keystone Transportation Funding Coalition just passed that resolution, didn't it, Bob?
Yes, they've communicated that to the General Assembly, and that's what the ask is, because otherwise it's just going to be a matter of, well, I think it should be this, or he thinks it should be that. And so let's get the numbers down on paper. Let's know what they are. Let's see what the appropriate target is and try to get to that.
So they want the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee, which is really a bipartisan institution that serves the whole General Assembly, to try to do this study to find out what is the percentage of the state police budget that would be used for just patrolling highways. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then that would be an appropriate number to come out of the motor license fund. We've conceded that. Throughout history, there's always been that amount of money, or that spending going on.
It doesn't seem like that would be such a difficult thing to do, and to perhaps more on myself, it seems surprising that it hasn't been done previously.
It would
Well-
certainly provide some predictability from year to year
Yes.
about what that amount is going to look like.
Yes,
That's a
exactly.
crazy idea,
How about
predictability.
that? Yeah. Well, and actually nailing down exactly what
Yeah,
the appropriate amount is,
exactly.
rather than just saying, oh, let's throw another $50 million at it.
Yeah.
So.
Can you talk about the number of communities that have been dropping police coverage to go to state police coverage? Do you have any idea what's the trend there?
Well,
say in the last year, last 5 years.
Just under 50% of the 2,500 municipalities now have no either local or regional police department.
Almost 50%.
I don't know.
Wow.
I do not
surprised by that.
know.
That is a large number.
I do not know, whether that's increased exponentially over the last 5 years or so or not. But I know that local governments are obviously under financial pressure, just like everybody else, and so that's being looked at. Mm-hmm. And that's really kind of focusing this issue and also elevating it, because that's a downward spiral too.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. That's a huge number, but it's also a big decision for municipalities, because it's not just a financial decision, it's also a safety concern for them too. So I'm surprised that the number's that high.
Yes.
I really am. So, well, let's shift gears here. We've got some other pots of money to talk about. Let's talk about our federal funding issues.
Well, they're right. I mean,
big news on the federal level.
I think the funding program at the national level was something that dominated the media for a couple of weeks. And for this reason, Congress bumped along for years and years and years and years with what we call either extensions of the highway program or continuations that were 6 months, 12 months, etc. That was really bad for State Department of Transportation like PennDOT, because you never really knew what you were going to be getting from year to year. Predictability. And so about a couple of weeks ago, then Congress finally did pass and the President signed a new highway bill, surface transportation bill, which funds highways, transit, and it also has now some block grant monies available for large intermodal, either rail, freight projects, which could be very positive as well. And it has some incremental increases in the amount of money that's going to go to states. So we're going to see, on the average, maybe out of the $1.6 billion a year we get from the federal government that goes to not only PennDOT, but also our public transit systems here and throughout the Commonwealth, about an additional $80 million, which is far, far below what we need. So the positives, the good and the bad is, we have a 5-year program, so we know what it's going to be.
5 years is significant.
5 years is significant. The bad news is, after 5 years, we're right back where we are now. So essentially, we scraped the cushions underneath the couch. We went to the Federal Reserve and said, you don't need this money in order to insure against bank failure. So we're going to take that $40 billion and use that to fund the highway program, which is kind of an odd way to fund infrastructure to me. We certainly believe in the user fee concept. So we have 5 years, that's positive. There's a bit of an increase, that's positive, but we still, once again, have a 4-year kind of looming.
Well, you've got 4 years to handle
it. 4 years to talk about it, and then another year to actually start working on it, to do more extensions. I'm just kind of kidding. But so you have to give particularly a number of our congressional members here in Pennsylvania some credit. Bill Schuster, chairman of the House Infrastructure Committee. Tough deal. I mean, if you've studied the U.S. Congress, if you looked at the dynamics and looked at what happened with Speaker Boehner and trying to cobble together enough votes to increase funding for any program, that was a pretty big deal on his part. We can snipe at the edges as to what the eventual product was, but it's positive in the end. Another very crucial member, Lou Barletta, representing Central Pennsylvania and up in the Hazleton area, member of the Transportation Committee, really pushed for more of the user fee concept and some other things. So a big driver of that as well. So we had some real leadership from Pennsylvania on that.
Okay. Well, Bob, we want to thank you for being with Mara and myself today. It looks like there's some very positive things. And so, at least in the short term, we're making progress, right?
I think that the motorists and people looking at transportation issues and how they impact their lives can be very happy with what they're going to see in the future. We're also working now with the Department of Transportation. You're going to see some very positive things in terms of real-time messaging to drivers on where projects stand, how to get around some of the delays because we have to work under traffic, but we want to make sure that those don't delay people as much as we can avoid that. And PennDOT is working on some very good messaging things, and when we can talk about that maybe later.
We would like to. Drivers, I'm sure, would appreciate that program, and we look forward to having you back, and hope for a very happy New Year for you.
Yes. Same to you both.
Okay, we'll be right back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this. Stay tuned.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States. And by Blackford Ventures, LLC, a private equity firm seeking to make significant investments in real estate, proven business enterprises, and their leaders. Find out more at www.blackfordventures.com. And by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. On this segment, I'm joined by Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy's Chairman, Ed Arnold, for a new version of the Arnold Report. Ed, welcome back to the show.
Good to see you, Charlie.
It's nice to have you back. And we're approaching the end of 2015, and the prospect of a presidential election year in 2016 looming in the foreground here. We find that some people have named the year of 2015, have coined it the year of Trump and the year of the anti-establishment. There's some on the state level who refer to it as the year of Governor Wolf and gridlock. But I believe you have a different sort of assessment of 2015, a different description for it. What would be your description of 2015 as we look back on the past year, Ed?
I would look at it as government on steroids. Government is taking control of everything in our lives. According to one international survey, America has dropped from the 17th freest country to the 20th. Why? Because of government regulations. The greatest winner and loser in this year and in the future, the way it looks, is free speech is losing to political correctness. We will discuss that in a later program because it's a lot more detail, but let's talk about a few of the specific areas where government regulation and freedom is being pushed down.
Well, you would say that there are some areas throughout this past year that have been winners and some that have been losers, just as we say when government gets involved with economic planning, that it ends up ultimately picking winners and losers. If we were to look at winners and losers, which area would you like to start out with?
Well, we could talk about our medical world, obviously, okay. Obamacare.
Let's start out with medical care then.
And who are the winners? The administrators. Basically, we have hired so much administration, government regulators, but also the companies that must, in fact, to meet these regulations, have to hire and hire. So you could say the employment side is a winner. The loser is the system. We are now going from let's say, a more community-type hospitals more and more to large hospital organizations.
Well, we see this relentless move to merge. Every day in the news, there's some type of news report about hospitals around the country merging as hospitals get larger and larger and larger.
That is correct. And I think it's basically because the ability to comply with all the regulations, if you're a large company, you can automate them better, you can handle them better. You have these giant compartments. But since you're a large company, you can weather the cost. A smaller medical facility is being driven out because of regulations.
Mm-hmm. We used to have a certificate of need in regard to hospitals, and that has gone by the way. It's no longer here, not used. Would it be a good thing or not to bring that back?
Well, actually, in some ways, I could say with larger and larger organizations, in some ways we are getting specialty. But basically, the significant need was a very cost-effective, better quality health care item, which why the politicians decided, I assume the lobbyists decided, that they didn't want to do it that way.
Mm-hmm. And this certificate of need was simply that before a hospital could get public money to offer one area of health care, they had to prove that there was no other in the immediate area that offered that same
they had to prove
area.
that they could have a substantial volume to, provide quality service, because when you do the same operation over and over again, you get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
But you also can do it more cost effectively.
Okay. So medical care is one area. And what's the second
I would like
area?
to expand that one further. The other loser in the medical area is our VA system.
Absolutely.
And again, who is benefiting, who is gaining? The administrators. Not only are they doing a terrible job and not getting fired because they have total job security, but they're getting bonuses because of their cheating.
Mm-hmm. Which is the second area that you'd like to cover?
Again, energy is obviously, again, who are the winners? Friends of Obama. This seems to be a theme. If you're on Obama, he is very much to pick winners and losers. The winners are the alternative energy companies, but specifically those who contribute to the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. That basically, like one of the questionables in our environmental winners is ethanol. We keep increasing the demand, artificial demand, by saying you must put so much in your gasoline. It was originally done because we had a shortage of energy in America. We don't. And the question is even ethanol environmentally sound? Has been challenged, but of course we don't want to talk about it. And it's politically, I could say politically incorrect to challenge Iowa, because that's the corn world.
Well, it seems like there's slowly but surely there's an awareness increasing about ethanol. Ethanol can't even be transported through pipelines because it doesn't have enough viscosity. So it has to be transported by trains and trucks.
Which is very fuel inefficient. Of course, the cost to produce it with farming and so on. And it's, of course, pushed up the price of corn for consumers and foodstuffs. And food has been rising in price. And one of the things is the price of corn.
And in terms of energy, certainly the losers would be exactly who the vice president predicted they would be at the beginning of their term, and that is?
The coal companies are the number one loser. That America, basically under the previous administration, we were trying to make coal cleaner and cleaner. Mm-hmm. The coal companies have now pretty much given up because they're making the bar so high that they know even if they met it, they would raise the bar again. And so basically coal has basically been driven out. And this is 40% of our energy. It was higher.
Well, 40% of our electricity that's generated is from coal. And it used to be as much as 48 to 49%. So it's down a little bit. And where are we going with that?
Well, we're even starting to attack natural gas. We have in California, they have passed a law that says cars must run totally energy clean, which basically means electric, possibly hydrogen, which is they already have cars, but it's very limited. And what is crazy is the New England states have mostly adopted the California standard. The little detail is in cold weather, cars' range drops 60%. Because batteries don't work as well. That doesn't seem to have affected our politicians in New England who are saying we're going to be politically correct. We're going to say we want electric cars. Electric cars are expensive and they're restrictive. Obviously, that they may have a place in some places where there's high pollution. But basically, this is a tremendous cost for questionable value.
Where are we going with the fracking industry? And the last topic on energy here in Pennsylvania, of course, the shale industry has yielded a lot of extra energy for us. It's resulted in lots of economic positive activity, lots of jobs in Pennsylvania. but we find Saudi Arabia opened up their pipelines to try to drive the price of oil down and drive the fracking industries out of business for the time being.
Well,
where are we going with fracking, Ed?
Ironically, Saudi Arabia's effect is partly, but really natural gas is what has really driven down in price below the cost of production, and that's totally domestic. Basically, you could say we're a victim of our own success. We have done such a good job in finding so much energy that we've driven the price down below the cost of production. So overall, the one thing our government could do is allow us to export. There is only one company that's going to start to export liquid natural gas. They freeze it and send it throughout the world. But that was approved during the Bush administration. There's not one terminal allowed to export under the Obama administration. Regulation. They've been approved by many of the departments, but there's so much approval, it still is going on now. Here we are. 8 years they've been fighting for approval. So would that solve the problem? No, but it would take some pressure off the success, because we have created the biggest area we've created jobs is in the fracking industry.
That's right. Well, in the last 2 minutes, banking. When we look at the area of banking, who've been the winners and losers there in 2015?
The winners, of course, are the too bigs to fail. We said they were too big to fail, and now we've got them to merge and buy and merge and buy. They're bigger than ever, and they're even way more too big to fail. And the other winners are the shadow banks, because regular small community banks, because of all the regulations, more and more, there's again merging to meet regulation.
Now, what is, I have to stop you, what is a shadow bank?
A shadow bank is a private bank that does not get your deposits, therefore does not have government regulation. But it also charges very high interest rates. But if you as a developer or somebody that really needs a loan and you need it now, there's no way you can get it through a regular system because the regulations are so laborious. The banks move very slow. They have to, because they got to check off all the areas and do all the checking that the government requires. Shadow banks have no regulation, so we've gone from extremely regulated to not regulated and more expensive because the supply and demand.
Okay, who have been the winners in banking?
Well, the winners, obviously, as I said, were the giant banks, and the
losers
are the small community banks, and in many ways, small businesses and so on, and businesses generally. Unless you are large enough to borrow from the big banks, you've got a problem.
Okay. In the last minute, the issue of individual safety or societal safety. What's been happening in 2015 with our individual safety?
Well, this is, again, winners and losers. The winners are the people of the world that want to come to America and have no restrictions and no checking. The losers are the American people who want security and to make sure that if immigrants do come in, they are, in fact, not going to harm us.
Well, the administration has promised they're going to transform America, and one of the ways they did it was to essentially dismantle many of our boundaries, many of our borders. And we're out of time again. I am so sorry. We are just getting started, aren't we, Ed?
Yes, that's correct. There's a lot to talk about.
You'll come back in February, and we will be talking then about a little bit more about free speech.
That's correct.
All right?
Yes.
All right. We'll
Very
see
good,
you then.
John.
Happy New Year, Ed.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. We'll see all of you again next week on Behind the Headlines. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Voice of PA. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.